Picture the exact second your savings cross six figures. Because that's not a number, that's a switch flipping somewhere deep in how money behaves around you. Most people treat $100,000 like a random checkpoint on the road to $1 million. They're wrong, and they're missing the entire story. This is the point where your cash stops sitting quietly in an account and starts pulling its own weight. And once you see how, you can't unsee it. I'm Aiden, and I've spent years digging through why some people quietly build real wealth while others just circle the block forever. If you want the honest breakdown of the threshold nobody explains properly, stick around, because this one might rearrange how you see your own bank app. Here's the part that caught me off guard the first time I dug into this. Everybody chases the millionaire headline, but the real engine kicks in way earlier, at six figures. It's like training your whole life for the championship game while ignoring the scrimmage that actually teaches you how to win. Going from 50,000 to 100,000 isn't simply doubling a number on a screen. It's closer to discovering your money had a second gear you never knew existed. So what actually changes? The first shift sounds almost too simple, but the math behind it is anything but boring. Your money starts earning real money. $10,000 at an 8% return nets you about $800 a year. Nice, sure, but it won't reshape your life. Now put $100,000 into that same 8%, and suddenly you're pulling $8,000 annually, untouched. That's not pocket change anymore. That's a second paycheck arriving while you're asleep. Stretch that out, and the picture gets even more absurd. Leave that $100,000 alone for 15 years at a steady 8%, and you're looking at over $300,000 without adding another cent of your own money. Your past self basically hands your future self a raise every single year, compounding quietly in the background while you're busy living your actual life. And here's the twist. That $8,000 keeps compounding if you leave it alone, meaning your invisible paycheck gets a raise every single year without you lifting a finger. This is where compound growth stops being some abstract line from a finance textbook and becomes something you can actually feel landing in your account. Before hitting six figures, compounding is like a coworker who's always about to help, but never actually shows up. After six figures, compounding clocks in every morning, does the work, and never asks for a day off. Compound growth doesn't show up until your money finally has enough weight to move. But nobody warns you about the mental side of this jump, and honestly, that part is both exciting and a little unsettling. Your brain, wired for years to think in terms of scarcity, suddenly has to learn a completely different operating system. And like any big software update, there are bugs along the way. There's actually a name researchers use for this kind of jump: cognitive recalibration, the process of updating deeply held beliefs about what's possible for you. It's the same mental adjustment athletes go through after a personal record, or students go through after acing an exam they were sure they'd fail. The old ceiling gets replaced by a new floor, and your brain needs a minute to catch up to reality. Call the first bug investment fearlessness. Before six figures, every dollar you invested felt like a gamble you couldn't afford to lose. What if the market drops and you need that rent money next week? But once six figures is sitting there, losing $1,000 on a rough trade becomes an annoyance, not a catastrophe. It's the difference between losing your one good pair of shoes and misplacing one pair out of a packed closet. That fearlessness unlocks moves that used to feel impossible. Buying when prices are falling, holding steady through the chaos instead of dumping everything at the bottom, and taking calculated swings on growth plays that could multiply over the years. Basically, you inherit the same mental toolkit wealthy people quietly use, which is exactly why their money keeps snowballing. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting from a behavioral standpoint. Crossing six figures triggers something researchers describe as an identity shift around wealth. Before that line, you might technically have savings, but you don't yet think of yourself as someone with money. You're still running scarcity software, making choices out of fear of losing what little you've built. Crossing into six figures rewires that. You start thinking like someone who has resources instead of someone who's just temporarily not struggling. This identity flip shows up in strange little ways. You stop refreshing your banking app 5 times a day because you already trust the number is there. You start buying based on value instead of sticker price. You start weighing opportunity cost instead of just asking, "Can I afford this?" That course you kept talking yourself out of suddenly looks like an obvious investment because a 10% bump in your earning power would pay it back within a few months. You also start noticing how much of your old money anxiety was actually just noise. The constant mental math of, "Can I afford this coffee? Can I afford this dinner?" quietly fades, replaced by bigger, more useful questions like where your money should live for the next decade. It's less about counting pennies and more about steering a ship. Small daily decisions matter less than the direction you're pointed in. Your relationship with your job transforms too. With 6 figures banked, you're no longer clocking in purely to survive. You're clocking in to build. That quiet shift in motivation creates a kind of professional confidence you genuinely cannot fake. You push back harder in negotiations because desperation isn't driving you anymore. You raise your hand for the hard project because failure won't sink you. You speak up in the room because getting fired isn't a 5-alarm fire the way it used to be. Money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys the nerve to ask for more. That confidence creates its own feedback loop. Success starts breeding more success because decisions made from strength, not fear, tend to be sharper decisions. You're more willing to jump ship for a better role. You invest in your network. You start playing the long career game instead of just treading water. There's a quieter piece to this too. The way your everyday stress levels shift once the number in your account stops feeling fragile. Cortisol, the stress hormone tied to constant low-grade panic, doesn't just respond to big emergencies. It responds to that background hum of what if something goes wrong this month. Once 6 figures is sitting there as a buffer, that hum quiets down and people describe sleeping better, arguing less about money with partners, and generally feeling like their nervous system finally gets to exhale. It's worth pausing here to admit something honest. Hitting this number doesn't erase every money worry overnight. You'll still budget. You'll still compare prices sometimes. But the texture of the worry changes. It moves from "can I survive this month?" to "how do I optimize the next decade?" And that's an entirely different kind of stress to carry. Now let's talk about the part almost nobody prepares you for. The social side gets weird fast once you cross this line. All of a sudden, you're the friend with money, and that label comes loaded with expectations you never signed up for. People assume you'll cover the group tab. Relatives start treating you like a free financial hotline. Dating gets stranger too. Some people are drawn to the security for reasons that have nothing to do with you as a person, while you start noticing money habits in partners that you never used to care about. That person who can't manage a credit card stops being quirky and starts being a genuine red flag. There's a ripple effect on your friendships too, and not always a comfortable one. Some friends genuinely celebrate the progress with you. Others get quietly weird about it, comparing their own numbers, making offhand jokes that land a little sharper than they intend. Nobody really talks about how isolating financial progress can feel in a friend group that hasn't caught up yet. But it's real, and it's worth being gentle about on both sides. Something else clicks into place around 6 figures, strategic spending. Instead of buying on impulse or avoiding purchases purely because of price, you start filtering everything through return on investment. The gym membership becomes a health investment. The pricey course becomes an income investment. The good mattress becomes a sleep investment. That doesn't mean you turn into some spreadsheet robot who only buys things with measurable payoffs. It means your spending finally gets intentional. You spend generously where it actually matters to you and cut ruthlessly everywhere else. Investing itself starts to feel exciting instead of terrifying. Before 6 figures, every dollar in the market felt like a bet you couldn't afford to lose. With a real foundation underneath you, a market dip becomes an opportunity instead of a threat. You finally understand why the legendary investors get excited when everyone else is panicking, because volatility isn't scary anymore. it's a discount rack. This shift is the real reason the wealthy keep pulling ahead. They're not richer because they're smarter. They're richer because they can afford to be calm when everyone else is scrambling. There's a version of this that plays out in almost every recession you'll ever read about. The people who quietly get wealthier during a downturn aren't the ones with the best predictions. They're the ones with enough cash sitting on the sidelines to act while everyone else is frozen. Six figures doesn't guarantee you'll time the market perfectly. It just guarantees you'll still be standing with dry powder when the opportunity shows up. Here's the part that genuinely surprised me. Hitting six figures changes your relationship with time itself. Living paycheck to paycheck traps you in what psychologists call tunnel vision on the present, because the future feels too shaky to even plan for. But real savings buy you what researchers call time flexibility. Suddenly, you're making decisions based on where you'll be in 10 years, not just where you'll be on Friday. The steady but boring job becomes a stepping stone instead of a sentence. The expensive certification becomes an obvious bet on your future self instead of a reckless splurge. Oddly, more money often makes people bolder, not more cautious. Someone sitting on six figures is statistically more likely to start a business, invest in themselves, or make a bold career pivot than someone living check to check. Call it the security paradox. Having more to protect somehow makes you braver, not more timid, because the foundation underneath you can absorb a misstep. Think of it like learning to ride a bike with training wheels versus without. Early on, every wobble feels like it could end in disaster, so you grip the handlebars and barely move. Once you trust your balance, you start taking turns faster, riding down hills you would have avoided before. Six figures is the financial version of finally trusting your balance. You're not reckless, you're just no longer terrified of a small wobble turning into a full crash. When you're broke, a $50 purchase can feel like a crisis. When you've got six figures banked, that same $50 barely registers, and suddenly you stop sweating the small stuff because you finally have real perspective on what actually matters. Real security doesn't make you smaller, it makes you willing to take up more room. The compounding itself becomes almost addictive once you're watching it happen live. Earning $8,000 to $10,000 a year in passive returns rewires how you think about your own money. It's not luck, it's not magic, it's just time and math working together in plain sight. But watching it happen in your own account hits differently than reading about it in a textbook. Your money starts to feel alive, like it's clocking in for a shift while you're asleep. This is where the mindset really flips. Instead of spending money, you start deploying capital. That might sound a little pretentious, but the psychological difference is real. Spend money and it's gone. Deploy capital and you're expecting it to come home with company. That single mental shift is what separates people who stay comfortable forever from people who actually build something lasting. Think about how differently those two people spend a random Tuesday. One is scrolling job boards out of quiet dread, refreshing their balance, hoping nothing unexpected hits the card this week. The other is scrolling the same boards out of curiosity, wondering if a better opportunity might be worth the leap, not because they have to look, but because they finally can. Same platform, same scroll, completely different emotional experience underneath it. Your internal career conversation changes too. The job you've been tolerating purely for the paycheck suddenly becomes optional, not because six figures lets you retire, but because it buys you enough runway to make a real move. You could take a short-term pay cut for a better company. You could go back to school. You could finally launch the side project you keep talking about. This freedom creates what researchers call approach motivation instead of avoidance motivation. Instead of running from being broke, you start running towards something worth building. Both are still running, but the experience and the outcome couldn't be more different. Here's something wild nobody mentions. Crossing six figures makes you basically invisible to predatory lenders. Payday loan shops, rent-to-own furniture stores, overdraft fee machines. They simply stop seeing you as a target. Meanwhile, wealth managers start sliding into your inbox wanting to talk strategy. It's almost funny how the same institution that once charged you a fee for being $3 short now wants to hand you a premium card with a ridiculous limit. The financial world runs on different rules depending on your balance, and crossing six figures gets you access to the better rulebook. But here's the part that actually keeps me thinking at night. This threshold reveals just how much of the economy depends on people never reaching it. If everyone had solid savings, who would pay 29% interest on furniture financing? Who would need a payday loan? The entire consumer debt machine survives because most people live paycheck to paycheck, and once you escape it, you realize exactly how rigged the game was. That realization can sting a little, because it means your progress isn't just about being smart. It's about learning rules that most people never even get shown. You're not winning because you outsmarted everyone. You're winning because you found the exit that was there the whole time. And once you see the exit, you start noticing it everywhere. The ad for the easy buy now, pay later checkout button. The credit card offer stuffed with fine print about deferred interest. The rent-to-own furniture store advertising no credit needed in flashing letters. None of that machinery is designed with your long-term interest in mind. It's designed to keep people circling the same block you just escaped. And once you notice the pattern, it's genuinely hard to unsee. There's also a quieter shift in how you handle bad news generally, not just financial bad news. A surprise medical bill, a car repair, a broken appliance. These used to be full-blown emergencies capable of derailing your entire month. With a six-figure cushion, they become annoyances you handle on a Tuesday afternoon and mostly forget about by Thursday. That alone is worth more than most people realize, because the mental bandwidth you get back from not constantly firefighting gets redirected somewhere productive. A side project, a certification, a relationship that actually gets your full attention instead of your distracted, stressed-out leftovers. Your standing at work shifts too. You're no longer just an employee who happens to show up. You're a professional who chooses to show up. That distinction changes how you carry yourself in every meeting. You speak differently because getting fired doesn't feel like a life sentence anymore. You negotiate differently because you actually have other options. You volunteer for the hard project because you can afford to bet on yourself. People notice that shift, whether they can name it or not. Financial stability radiates outward. Employers hand you the bigger opportunities because you seem grounded and sure of yourself. It becomes this strange loop. Acting like someone who deserves more eventually leads to actually getting more. It's not fake it till you make it in some hollow, performative sense. It's more that the anxiety that used to leak into every interaction quietly disappears, and people respond to that steadiness, whether they can name what changed or not. So here's the real takeaway. Six figures was never just a savings target. It's the entrance ticket to an entirely different financial reality. One where compounding stops being theory and starts being your quietest, most reliable teammate. The number doesn't just sit in your account, it starts working the night shift for you. If you're still grinding toward that milestone, remember every dollar you stack is buying more than a bigger balance. It's buying you options, nerve, and the mental space to think strategically instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. The version of you built during that climb matters just as much as the number at the end. One last thing worth sitting with. None of this happens because of a lucky break or a secret formula nobody else has access to. It happens because of unglamorous, repeated decisions, automating a percentage of every paycheck before you can spend it, resisting lifestyle creep when a raise hits, choosing boring index investments over exciting stock tips from a group chat. The milestone feels dramatic in hindsight, but the path to it is almost always quiet and a little boring in the moment. That's honestly good news, because boring is repeatable, and repeatable is exactly what builds real wealth over years instead of overnight. If this reframed how you think about the six-figure mark, hit like and subscribe to Winds of Thought. I break down the psychology behind real wealth building every single week. Drop a comment and tell me how close you are to your own six-figure line. Your future self is going to thank you for starting today.